Hello and welcome to another episode in the cancelled game series. While I beaver away on some of the longer episodes, I thought they'd do something a little bit different. So this one isn't showcasing games for a specific console or computer, it's games based on Marvel comic books. Marvel's popularity is no new phenomenon, so we have a few more modern games here, but also some going back to the 90s for several different systems. And Marvel characters have featured in some brilliant games over the years, especially arcade beat-em-ups and fighters, many of which were ported to home consoles. Standout titles for me include The Punisher, X-Men vs Street Fighter and the Marvel vs Capcom series. But join me as I take a look at 8 of the Marvel games that never saw release. Marvel Chaos was a fighting game being developed exclusively for the Xbox 360 by EA Chicago in early 2007. Looking at the footage uploaded by PtoPOnline, it looks like a 3D arena fighter, much like Power Stone. Blending the Marvel universe and characters with this type of gameplay is in principle a great idea, but it seems that they struggled to execute it well. The footage shows a number of playable Marvel characters, including Thor, Captain America, the Hulk, Doctor Doom, Juggernaut, Wolverine, Spider-Man and Venom. The main menu shows that Marvel Chaos would have had several game modes, the most interesting of which is this What If option. I'm not sure what this would have been, but I assume that it would be tied into Marvel's What If series of comics. These comics depicted alternate universes which had branched off from the main Marvel universe, featuring scenarios like, what if the X-Men died on their first mission, what if Peter Parker became the Punisher, or what if Doctor Doom had become a hero. You get the idea. If the game mode in the menu was somehow tied to the comic book series, then that could have been something really cool. There's a What If series coming out on TV next year I believe, so I'll be keeping an eye out for that. As you can see, the menu is heavily stylised on the comic books, and the game world and characters seem to aim for a more comic book aesthetic too, although that's obviously much harder to achieve in a 3D game. The levels seem to be very interactive and destructible, much like Power Stone. It certainly had the potential to be great. I can imagine the joy of picking up a car as the Hulk and throwing it across the arena into an opponent, or whacking someone with Thor's hammer and watching them smash buildings in their wake as they fly through the air. So many great opportunities for this kind of thing when you combine superhuman characters with destructible environments. In January of 2008 it was announced that Marvel and EA had scrapped plans to make any fighting games based on the Marvel universe, together at least, and EA Chicago was closed. It seems that the game's cancellation was due to quality issues, so perhaps they did struggle to achieve their aim here. Daredevil the Man Without Fear, also known simply as Daredevil, was a third-person action beat-em-up in development in 2003 for the PS2, Xbox and PC. It was being developed by 5000 Feet and would be published by Encore. This was directly based on the Frank Miller Daredevil comics and would have an original storyline derived from the Elektra Lives Again comic book story involving Daredevil and, of course, Elektra. Initially this was a low budget title planned only for the PlayStation 2, but Sony announced the upcoming Daredevil film, so the project grew into a multi-platform release and Encore brought in a larger budget. It was Encore, the game's publisher, that owned the Daredevil rights at the time and a few other Marvel properties. The gameplay shifted at this point too. Development shifted to creating an open world action game featuring beat-em-up style combat and a grind feature that would allow Daredevil to grind on rails and cables. Grind as in like rollerblading, not rubbing his crotch on them. Marvel weren't too happy with this direction and preferred the game sit more in line with the source material. Development continued in the midst of these disagreements, but several other developmental issues arose. They had trouble with the game's engine when in Daredevil's vision mode, and in the end the open world aspect of the game was scrapped altogether, making it a more linear third-person beat-em-up. This, as well as some personnel issues at 5000 Feet, resulted in several delays, but the final nail in the coffin came when Marvel wouldn't approve the game as they felt it had strayed too close to what Sony had wanted the project to be. A shame, as the development was almost entirely finished. All we have on X-Women is a shockingly poor clip from 1996's E3, I'm afraid. With a title that unusually plays on the X-Men franchise, X-Women The Sinister Virus was to be a side-scrolling action game exclusively for the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if you're in North America, featuring several female X-Men including Storm and Rogue. Being developed by Clockwork Tortoise and planned for a late 96 release, X-Women was to be a spiritual successor to X-Men 2 Clone Wars, but was cancelled when Sega shifted their focus to the Saturn. Despite the lack of information, this still looks like it could have been an interesting addition to the Mega Drive's library. Ghost Rider was a side-scrolling action game from Neversoft to be published by Crystal Dynamics exclusively for the PlayStation. It used the Skeleton Warriors engine, with 3D environments and sprites. Development didn't really start, as this footage is of a demo that Neversoft built in 1995 to showcase the engine's lighting and fire effects, the chain weapon mechanics, and as a means to prove to Marvel that Neversoft's depiction of Ghost Rider would be faithful to its comic book inspiration. The gameplay is reminiscent of Castlevania, with Ghost Rider's chain lashing enemies much like Simon's whip. 15 levels were planned both on foot and on his signature motorcycle, and Ghost Rider would have had an array of attacks beyond the chain weapon, including Hellfire and a deadly stare. There was some reorganisation at Crystal Dynamics, and despite efforts to revive interest in the game, they decided to scrap the idea as it wasn't fully 3D, which was the hot ticket in the mid-90s. Marvel 2099 One Nation Under Doom was a side-scrolling action game being developed by Sapphire and to be published in 1996 by Mindscape. Again, I can only find this horrendous footage, so apologies for the quality. Another planned PlayStation exclusive, Marvel 2099 would be based on Marvel's 2099 comic book series. The game would have featured 8 playable characters, including the 2099 versions of Spider-Man, Daredevil, the Punisher, the Hulk, the Thing, Ghost Rider, and at least one of the X-Men. It's a 2D scrolling beat 'em up, but the characters are rendered in 3D. Mindscape were distributing promotional materials for the game, and a demo was shown at 96's E3 featuring one playable Punisher level, shown here in this footage. Soon after this, Mindscape cancelled all of their upcoming console titles, including Marvel 2099. The footage isn't much to go on, but a side-scroller based on the Marvel 2099 series would have certainly been one to watch. The Avengers, also known as THQ's Avengers, was a first-person action shooter / beat 'em up heading to the PS3, 360, Wii U and PC in 2012. THQ had recently acquired the Avengers license from Marvel. The main focus was on the PS3 and 360 versions, which would be developed by THQ Studio Australia. Blue Tongue Entertainment would handle the PC port, and the Wii U version was merely discussed as an option. Although it's planned to release in tandem with the first Avengers film in 2012, it would feature a separate, unique storyline. The plot was based on the Secret Invasion short series of comics, which ran from 2008 to 2009. In Secret Invasion, the Skrulls have been plotting an invasion of Earth for some time by secretly replacing many of Earth's superheroes with shape-shifting imposters, hence the comic's title. Although the story would be based around Secret Invasion and take elements from it, the game would have had an entirely new story, with Brian Michael Bendis, who wrote the comics, taking charge of the script. The gameplay footage of this just looks brilliant. Despite being originally envisioned as a third-person action game, typical of previous Marvel action games, you play in first person, taking control of one of the Avengers. The footage shows the player controlling Iron Man, the Hulk, Captain America and Thor, and showcases each's unique attacks. These attacks would correspond to each of them as one would expect if familiar with these characters. Thor can summon lightning, Captain America can throw his shield, Iron Man can fly, etc. It seems that these 4 Avengers would make up the bulk of the gameplay, but some other unlockable characters were planned too, which would play smaller roles: Black Widow, Hawkeye, War Machine and Ms. Marvel. And there would be several non-playable cameos too, like the Fantastic Four and Ant-Man. Gameplay was designed with an emphasis on cooperative play, with players working together to succeed by combining each Avenger's abilities and even performing assist attacks. 4 players could team up both off and online. The huge number of Skrull warriors you'd come up against would have superpowers of their own, each based on the powers of other Marvel superheroes, including the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. As we all know, THQ ran into financial difficulties in 2011, which first resulted in both studios being closed, followed by the auctioning off of all their IPs, including the Avengers. It was bought by Ubisoft, and they went on to use said license to develop 2012's Marvel Avengers Battle for Earth for the 360 and Wii U. Although this was a fighting game, it was also based around the Secret Invasion storyline. Spider-Man Classic was a planned Spider-Man game that would pay tribute to Spidey's most classic face-offs from the comics. This was being developed by Shabba Games for the PS3 and 360, a sequel to their 2008 game Spider-Man Web of Shadows. Development began in 2008 after Web of Shadows was done and dusted, and Activision would be publishing. Unfortunately, there's no footage as this never progressed beyond the conceptual stage. The footage you're seeing here is the trailer for Web of Shadows. What we do have is some concept art showing that you'll be able to play as either Spider-Man or Wolverine. As I mentioned, this would be an homage to Spidey's classic fights, and so would feature villains including Carnage and Mysterio, and no doubt many others. One notable omission was Venom, who would be absent, having appeared in Web of Shadows. Shabba Games went bust in 2009, so this project died with them. Activision did go on to publish another Spider-Man game from a different studio, 2010's Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, which used some of this game's assets. An X-Men game was planned for Sega's Mega Drive and Genesis add-on, the 32X, and was to be a console exclusive. It was given the working title X-Men Mind Games and was shown at E3 in 1995. An early prototype was released in 2009, albeit in a very bare-bones state. The only playable character is Bishop, although it indicates that Wolverine, Iceman and Rogue would have also been selectable in the final version. This alone interests me, as I've always loved Bishop as a character. I have no idea why the game was cancelled, but more likely than not it was just the usual reason: the 32X was not doing well. In fact, we all know that it was a miserable failure. Either way, I think the gameplay looks pretty uninspiring, and I'm not a fan of this graphical style at all. A 2D side-scrolling X-Men game would have been much better. So that was 8 unreleased Marvel games. Let me know in the comments which of these interested you, or I'd also be interested to hear what your favourite Marvel characters are. Keep an eye out for more episodes in the Cancelled Games series, including a similar episode on games based on DC Comics. And as always, thanks for watching. You can find the other episodes in my Cancelled Games series in this playlist.